All right, we're going to start, everyone. Good afternoon. If you're not on mute, please mute yourself unless you're one of the panelists. My name is Megan Williams, and I'm the Director of Support Services at Alzheimer Group. We're pleased to have you today join us for a panel discussion on investigating sundowning. These lectures are made possible thanks to the Lindsay Memorial Foundation. AGI is a non-for-profit organization who supports families and individuals living with dementia, as well as professional care providers. If you have any questions about our organization, please feel free to contact us at a further date. You will be receiving an email with an evaluation at the after this lecture, and it's very important for us to have your feedback. So today, before we begin, I just want to let you know this is a different format than we're used to. Normally we have one person give a lecture talking specifically about one topic, but we thought it would be a little bit different addressing the topic of sundowning. Sundowning is a topic that comes up often at AGI and probably a topic that happens, something that you talk about a lot in your house or in the residence where you might be working. So what we're going to do is we will change the format a little bit. We might ask you to use the chat button at the bottom to give us some feedback about your own experiences, and we will have questions at the end. Okay. Nope, it's not working. Hold on. All right.
Hervig, do you want to introduce, Megan, do you want to introduce
Yes,
the
I'm
panelists?
sorry. So before I begin, today, many of you already know the counselors at AGI. We have Karen Duro, who is an art therapist and counselor, Marivik Apollon, who's a recreation therapist and a counselor, and I am a social worker and counselor at AGI. So please, we will begin.
All right, I'm just going to admit this next person. All right, so we're going to start out by talking about what sundowning is. Basically, people living with dementia, some people, about 20% of people, have a chronic difficulty coping at some point in the day. Usually it's late afternoon, evening, and or overnight. Although it can actually happen that some people can have that difficulty coping at a different point of the day. So for example, occasionally we'll come across somebody who wakes up confused or wakes up from a nap and, at a certain point of day confused. So it's not always happening at sundown, but for the most part, most people who have this chronic part of the day where they're chronically having a hard time coping, oftentimes it's at sundown, evening, overnight, okay? Which is why, of course, it's called sundowning. And some care partners, anecdotally, we hear it a lot, report that the problem gets worse in the winter, perhaps because of the shortening day, perhaps because of the weather, perhaps because we're not doing as much because of the weather. There's lots of reasons why it might be getting worse in the wintertime. We don't really know why people sundown, why this is a specific problem, but we have some theories that we'll talk about, okay? And yeah, so that's what sundowning is, and that's what the subject of this talk today is.
Okay, so we thought it would be really interesting to hear about some of the common behaviors that are associated with sundowning. So I just, so for myself, I hear a lot of people towards the end of the day, they might be looking for their parents or wanting to go home. And it's really challenging, especially for a lot of caregivers, because they're probably in the middle of dinner or they've just finished dinner and they want to clean up, and this person is constantly, searching, maybe packing their bags, wanting to go home. Marivik, what are some things that you hear from some of...
Well, for some of the clients that I work with recently, one of the things that he reported is that they were getting ready to go to bed, and he was getting ready to sleep, maybe around 9-10 o'clock, and then all of a sudden he heard his spouse in the other room taking off, picture frames, putting it in a bag. So basically confused, saying, oh, we're going to need this to when we go somewhere, right? So, I mean, so that's when it gets challenging. Also, a lot of repetition, a lot of confusion and anxiety as well at the same time.
So I guess the person might be feeling a little bit uneasy, wanting to get ready and maybe go somewhere. Karen, what do you hear about in your experience?
Yeah, I think along with that increased confusion, I hear a lot about people who are either more irritable at that time of day, or especially people who get a little bit more clingy at that time of day, maybe because of that confusion and that discomfort and that feeling of insecurity. But often, it's a time of day where care partners are trying to, clean up at the end of the day, get the dishes done, do everything, all of the organizing that has to be done after dinner time, and yet the person living with dementia wants them right there next to them in the room where they can see them, helping them. I think we also hear a lot about people who at the end of the day can't do things that they could do in the morning. So for example, a person might be able to get dressed on their own in the morning, but just not be able to figure out how to do it at bedtime. So just having a harder time with everything and wanting their safe person to be really, really close to them. I think that's another aspect that we see a lot. Also losing temper, getting angry, getting frustrated. I think all of those things go hand in hand.
We also, you were talking about wanting to be around that person, Karen, for security, but I've also heard many times where they might not recognize their spouse or their loved one who they might have just sat down and had a meal with, or had coffee, or just watched TV with, or they leave the room and then suddenly they don't recognize that person. And it's a real shock for a lot of families.
Yeah, go ahead, Maravik.
No, I think just one spouse has reported actually exactly that happened, right? They were just had dinner, they were like watching TV, and all of a sudden the husband said, oh, my wife is coming, like, I mean, I don't think you should be here, this is not right, or something like that. So yeah, it can happen. And I guess this is what's happening, right? Because it's like it falls a lot on the caregiver's shoulder, right? Like you get caught in that web, and all of a sudden, like, how do I respond to this? And especially if there's like, after that, it causes a lot of stress and this behaviors that so it can really be challenging.
Yeah. So let's look at a little list, I think. So behaviors associated with sundowning. This is similar to what we've spoken about already. There's an increased confusion in the person living with dementia. They might be disoriented to time, to place, to person. They might become agitated, or as some people say, wandering, kind of looking for something or needing to go somewhere. Increase anxiety, so they need more security, that sometimes families are having a difficult time providing them. Karen, do you want to read some?
Sure. Irritability, just generally having a more difficult time managing emotions, whatever those emotions are. I think that is often very mercurial, We see impulsivity, so the person has a thought and wants to act on it without regard to time of day, what they should be doing, things like that. And, we see a lot of increased language impairment, and it's very easy to recognize when a person has a harder time saying what they want to say, articulating their speech. But one thing that maybe is not always picked up on is how much in this confused period of day the person might be having a hard time understanding what you're saying. So it can become a problem where there's just too many words going on and the person is just too overwhelmed, and they just can't handle, their brain just can't handle processing the words that you're saying. Maravik, do you want to finish the slide?
Sure. So there's also increased difficulty carrying out activities of daily living, as what Karen has already mentioned. Things that it's easy during the day, it can become really impossible at the end of the day, where the caregiver's energy is also waning down. So it's a challenge. socially inappropriate behavior, delusions and hallucinations, seeing things. So that can be heightened at that time of the day.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess I'll continue, right? So sundowning is a complex syndrome of behavior. So it's not just one specific to just one behavior, but it's really is unique to every individual. There are numerous reasons we don't know about, like that, what's causing the behavior. So and not limited to just one reason, but as caregivers, I think in terms of solution, you may need 2 or 3 coordinated interventions actually in strategies to be able to respond to the needs of your family member. And it helps, and sometimes we get caught up with the behavior and we can't think beyond the behavior. So I think this is we may have to try to be detectives at this time, because there could be trigger, and of course there are unmet needs that perhaps the person who is sundowning at the moment is actually experiencing. So it's a challenge for behaviors to go look beyond the behavior at present, but I think it is encouraged actually to really look at like what could be beyond that behavior. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So causes, I think that family members really want to know, well, what's causing it? And then of course, later on, what we're going to talk about is how do you solve the problem so that we can reduce some of these behaviors, because they can be so challenging. So what are some, maybe Karen, you can start. What are some of the causes that you see for sundowning?
Yeah, I think, I think that sometimes we have a tendency to jump to conclusions that the behavior is being caused by one specific thing. And I think one of the things that we do at AGI in our clinical meetings, for sure, when we're trying to figure out a more difficult behavior, and sundowning definitely falls in that category, because it's not one thing with one simple solution, right? We can't tell you, oh, your loved one's sundown, so you should do this, because people sundown for a lot of different reasons, right? It's not just one thing, right? So I think that sometimes we just sort of make assumptions that, oh, this behavior is being caused by this, and we just try and act on that. And when it doesn't work, we think, well, there's nothing I can do. Let's go, get some medication, which of course has its place, but I think sometimes we need to go a little bit deeper. So, we talk a lot about different things that could be causing it in our clinical meetings and in our counseling sessions. One direction we look is the physical. So does this person have any infection, especially if the sundowning is something that's just started recently and has a sudden onset? So we're going to look for physical reasons. We're going to see, does the person have pain at that time of day? Maybe they're spending all day sitting in a chair, not moving, and by the end of the day, their back is killing them, but they don't have the verbal skills or the ability to read their body and articulate, I hurt, and that's why they're getting upset. Or maybe there's a medication problem. Maybe the medication that they're on is wearing off at that time of day. Or maybe they've just taken a medication and the sundowning and the medication is causing confusion or agitation. There's a lot of different physical things. Yes.
Karen, and I've also seen that sometimes people will give medication and then it will have kind of the opposite effect. So, the families are really like, well, maybe let's just increase that dose of medication, but really it's getting them more and more agitated. And then they just, you're looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think there's times when we're asking what seem like prying questions of caregivers, but when we're looking for triggers, we always want to look at the bigger picture than just what the behavior is itself, because sometimes there's things going on that we don't really make the connection directly to the behavior unless we've seen it before. And those medications that we see that kind of opposite effect a lot are things like anti-anxiety medications, antipsychotic medication, sedatives can cause that effect. You can actually get more agitated on a sedative, and it happens with older adults, especially those who have dementia. Things like the medication for dementia can cause that as a side effect. So it's important to know what the side effects, even the more rare side effects are of medication, because sometimes you're giving the medication to prevent the behavior and it's actually making it worse. So I think that's a really good point. Maravik, do you want to talk maybe about emotional triggers?
Sorry. Swallowed at the wrong pipe. So emotional triggers, it can be, all of a sudden, one of the things that we noticed with people with dementia, right? They don't want to be bossed around. So it's regardless whether they're sundowning or not, they want to be treated as a person, that's still involved in everything. But it gets, it gets heightened, or they become more sensitive, I guess, on that time of the day, right? Like where they're emotionally raw at that time.
I think too, Maravik, don't you think too, if you've been bossed around all day long, maybe by bedtime you would have had enough too?
Of course. Yeah. But there's also the emotional need of knowing that you are losing all the skills and strength, and you just feel insecure at the end of the day. Again, that's going back to the limbic system, where your primal brain is telling you to survive. And at that time, with all the confusion and everything at the end of the day, it's like the only person I could latch onto who is my strength is my wife or my husband, or so there is that emotional need for security. And
or by opposite, you want everybody to go away and leave you alone, and your wife is trying to help you because she sees you struggling and you just want her to get away.
So it's a really complicated, right? There's really no sundowning causes. It's really, we don't really understand about, really, even experts, they're baffled by it, right? Why a person is sundowning. All we have are the theories, right? And
this is why we have a panel discussion today, because as much as we try to support families, we're not an expert on this topic either, but we can try to work together. The other thing we didn't talk about for possible causes would be things that might be happening in the environment. And I think this is what you hear often about, the lighting it's getting darker earlier and earlier, especially as the winter months are coming. And maybe people are noticing a person might be getting agitated or more confused earlier in the day. So people have talked about putting on a happy light or and things like that. But also, I guess that's where a lot of the delusions and hallucinations can come from, where people, with someone's vision changes as well, they might misinterpret what they're seeing. Maybe because of the low lighting, they might see, for example, an object in the corner of the room, and they might think that there's a person there watching them undress in their bedroom. They might not recognize themselves in the mirror. We see that often, and I've even, over the years, we've heard people almost hit the mirror, and which would cause danger, of course, to their well-being. But also, I don't know about you guys, but when we used to work in the office, when we would come home and, someone's cooking dinner and they have the music blaring and all of this fun stuff, it's the end of the day happening. For me, whether I have dementia or not, the noise, turn it off. It was making me more and more agitated. So the environment really plays a factor. The noise level, the lighting, movement, people around you, moving quickly to clean up the dishes, that sudden change might really bother a person.
So may I add one thing, Megan? I think at the end of the day, it's really comes sundowning is, I think the way I understand it myself is that really, it really lies in the capacity of the person to, you know, their energy level. I think most of the time they're overtired. I like if you look at the brain, I think it's really important to understand the routine of the person, the sleep-wake cycle, and you're not just talking about sleeping and waking up, but also high energy and low energy. So the idea is like really you need to have like a really nice rhythm, right? Like, okay, you're not crushing up and down, but there's like a really nice rhythm, you know, especially your circadian rhythm, because I mean, that's what your brain needs. But at the end of the day, though, if we're not as caregivers, because they rely so much on us, if we're not aware of this, of our family's routine on how they spend their day, how they spend their energy, I guess that's what most likely can happen at the end of the day, especially in the later stages of the disease. Sorry, where you don't have the chance to recharge, or you're not, because at the end of the day, people in the moderate to late stages, they're slowly lacking their ability to regulate their sleep and or high energy, low energy. So failure to do so can actually really cause you to be really lost and confused. So and also, unfortunately, that's also the time when the caregiver's energy.
Yeah, we'll talk about
Yeah.
that.
You know, I
Yeah.
think I often think of it as like, you know, the person living with dementia are working hard all day long, like as if you know, started a new job for the very first day and you were worried all day that you were going to make a mistake, and you were hyper focused all day long on making a good impression and doing things correctly. And even if you're with a person who just seemed to sit on the couch all day, we don't always realize, those of us with typically aging brains don't always realize how hard this person is working. And on those days where you've been put in a situation where you have to work that hard, you come home and you're exhausted at the end of the day, and you probably needed to be quiet and you just want to sit on the couch and do nothing and not be bothered. And you know, this isn't the time of day for you on that day to start introducing, you know, this is not the day where you're going to want to sit with your husband or your wife and play chess, right? The problem is when you have dementia, sometimes getting undressed and getting ready for bed is like playing chess, right? So we don't realize how much expectation we're putting on people without realizing what state they're in, and how much pressure that might feel like on the person. And so, you know, on that day where you start a new job and somebody made you play chess, you might explode on them if you're losing the game, right? And sweep the pieces off the board, and right, and just have enough. Well, for that person, they might be having that reaction to you telling them, go put your pajamas on, brush your teeth, get ready for bed, right? Yeah. So I think it's just a matter of us being aware that it's exhausting to go through life with dementia. All right, so
We talked about this.
I have here, Megan, I think you have a different version than I have, because we're supposed to be talking about investigating triggers here, no?
That's what I have, Karen.
Yeah.
Okay, it's coming up later then. I
Coming
think you
up
have the
later.
old version before we reordered it. But that's
Okay.
okay. We'll just do it as that.
In terms of the causes, I think we've talked about it. We've talked about, you know, the lighting and the noise and medication and things like that. Let's talk about the unmet needs now, Karen.
Sure. I'm just sorry. I just have to reorganize my printed version.
Sorry.
All right. No, that's okay. That's fine. All right. So when we talk at AGI, when we're trying to figure out what's going on with a person, we often want to, we think about most behaviors in terms of unmet need. So if a person is losing their temper, or is agitated, or is clinging, or is upset, or discombobulated, anxious in some way, we don't think of that behavior as just a behavior. We think of it as the only way the person living with dementia has in this moment to express a need that's not being met. Okay. Maybe the need isn't being met because the person isn't able to recognize what his or her own needs are. Okay. And maybe they can earlier in the day, but when they're exhausted at the end of the day, they can't do it anymore, right? Maybe the person recognizes what their needs are, but doesn't have the words to articulate it. Okay. Maybe the person has this need, but can't do the activity that will help them meet the need. So an example I'm thinking of is somebody who recognizes I have to go to the bathroom. They're getting really anxious looking for the bathroom, but they can't find the bathroom because they have a problem with wayfinding. And so that can be something that could cause the person to get really upset, right? Maybe the person knows what they need to do. They can even think of the activity. They can find a way to meet the need, but they can't figure out how to initiate the first step. They can't get started. They know they need to go to the bathroom, but they can't find the bathroom, or they can't figure out, sometimes we see people who want to sit down on the toilet, but they can't figure out how to position themselves with their back to the toilet so they can sit. I know it seems like a small thing, but that can be something that's incredibly anxiety provoking and incredibly upsetting. And this might end up looking like a person who's incontinent, but really they just can't figure out the process of getting properly seated at the toilet, right? Or maybe the person can't carry out the steps to complete the activity to meet their needs successfully. So when you have an unmet need, you have to recognize what it is. You have to think about, of all the myriad of possibilities of things you could do, what you could do to meet the need. Then you actually have to figure out how to carry out the activity that will help you meet the need. And you have to be able to do it successfully. That's a lot going on. And for a lot of people in that sundowning state, they just can't do that. And so it's on us as care partners to be paying attention and trying to figure out, well, what might this person need in this moment? And how can I support them in meeting their own need? And when I talk about needs, I don't mean what we think the person needs. It's what the person thinks the person needs. Make sense? All right.
So I guess, how do we, as counselors, what are some questions that we would ask the care partners how to figure out these unmet needs? So
for me in my end, usually what I ask them is that, they come to you, they ask you, I think my husband or my wife is sundowning. I ask them, like, what are the behaviors? What happened before that? Or what happened during the day? I mean, did he or did she have enough sleep the night before? So all those, like, thinking, or do you think he's in pain? I mean, really, even up to like a week ago, like sometimes I would ask, like, what happened? Are there any, or maybe there are medication changes, or, all those possible things. Like, I usually try to look at the physical side first, and then look at, like, then look at the what happened in the environment or within the family, were there news, like all these things. So I try to really investigate this different scenarios.
it sounds, Maravik, like it's very much of an individualized approach, because it's not like a checklist where we go down and say, okay, well, what medication are they on, or how have they slept their 8 hours a day? Because not everyone needs all of that.
Yeah.
Some people need more activity during the day. Some people need less activity during the day. So Karen, what do you think? What are some things that you would ask care partners how to identify their needs, the unmet needs?
I usually start by asking the care partner to tell me if they can recall exactly the words the person used and exactly what the person was doing with their body. Because, a care partner who says to me, my husband didn't recognize me last night. Okay, but is that because the husband said to you, where's my wife? I need to go, or, I don't have a wife. Or did my husband say, you look like my wife, but I know you're not my wife? Or did, like, I need to know more. We can get a lot of information by knowing exactly what the person said and the tone of voice they said it in, right? Or maybe the person used a word substitution and called their wife their sister, or, so I usually start by asking for the person, to the best of their ability, to recall to me exactly what the person said and what they were doing with their body, what their tone of voice was, what their expression was. And if they can't remember, I ask them the next time it happens to really pay attention to that and maybe even write it down. Sorry, I'm just going to admit somebody from the weight room. There we go. So that's one thing I do. I also, with Maravik, I ask for a lot about the context, what happened just before, what happened through the whole period of the day, all of that stuff. And also I often ask, well, how did the situation resolve? Did you like stumble upon something that worked? Did you wait it out? Like, how did it continue from that point too?
I think, Karen, and Maravik, what sometimes the families don't realize is that we need to kind of, it's not only that we need the details to try to kind of help be that detective, but I think it gives a new frame of mind for care partners to actually like really break it down. And sometimes what you know, if this is an ongoing behavior, maybe there's an unmet need that it's just, you know, we need to kind of look at, okay, in the last week, let's keep a journal and maybe even a timeline. Like, is it usually the same time of day, or are we noticing that it's very sporadic? Sometimes I hear about people having these anger outbursts, you know, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometimes it could be 8 o'clock at night. So, and again, what's happening? Has it been the same thing all week, or has there been changes, people coming in and out of the house, and you know what that might look like?
I think it also helps. Sorry, Mary.
Okay,
I think it also helps for us to know, just in a more general context, what does the person generally have a hard time with? Is the person having a hard time with recognizing objects? If the person has a hard time recognizing objects, then it follows that the person might have a hard time recognizing, you know, that their loved one is their loved one, or that their house is their house, or that their dog is their dog, or whatever, right? Or does the person have really poor short-term memory in general? Or does the person struggle with anxiety in general? And sometimes things that are manageable and they can cope with during the day become more extreme at that sundowning time. So just knowing the person in general and knowing what they tend to have a hard time with can help us anticipate what's going to be a bigger problem at this time of day.
Yeah, and it could maybe even be a behavior from like long ago, right? Changes that have happened long ago, that maybe that person was anxious growing up, and then they were okay for most of their adulthood, and then now it's just reemerging again. So
yeah, I think life experiences too. I think that sometimes, you know, past traumas or past worries or past experiences tend to work themselves into the confusion that happens now. And, you know, in those confused times of day. So knowing a little bit more about the person's past and their life experiences can be really helpful. You know, knowing, for example, that a person took care of a parent who had dementia, you know, knowing, or who had mental illness or was sick, and they were maybe a teenage care partner, well, it makes a whole lot more sense when they start demanding they need to go home because their mother needs them, right? Things like that can be really helpful for us to understand, well, this person needs to take care of this problem. Just the fact that the person is worried about something that happened a long time ago and isn't happening now doesn't make it any less of an unmet need, right? So looking into the whole context of the person's life and not just the day and the week can also help us understand the behavior.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to talk about investigating. Karen, did you want to go through this?
Sure. I think we added this slide because I think, you know, we kind of have a mindset that we use in our clinical work when we're trying to figure out what's going on, what's triggering a behavior for a person living with dementia. And we kind of want it to demystify sort of the mindset that we take. So the first thing is, the reality is our brains don't work very well when we're not calm. So the first thing we have to do is calm ourselves down. And the easiest way we know how to do that is to take a step back, stop, don't do anything yet, just take a deep breath. So, sometimes in the moment, we just need to get through, take a deep breath and get through it as best we can. But we always want to go back later and try and figure out what really happened. So that's the very first step. And really, we tell you that over and over and over again in every course and every lecture, right? So I'm a bit of a broken record. I see Linda nodding her head. I'm such a broken record about the deep breath, but I'm telling you, it will get you through, okay? Then, like we were talking about just before, we want to look beyond the immediate behavior. We want to look at it in the context of the whole day, the whole week, the whole routine of the person. We want to look at the life context of the person. We want to look at the big picture and not only the specific behavior, okay? So, and we're not trying to just get the person to stop the behavior, right? We can tell a person stop doing that, but they're not going to stop. We need to understand the root of the behavior so that we can deal with the root, or we have no hope of getting that behavior under control. Okay. We want to encourage the person to talk or show. Sometimes when the person is really agitated, we want them to calm down and be quiet. That's not our goal here, because the more we can get the person to talk to us or show us or interact with us, the more information we have to work with to figure out what's going on. Okay. It works. We get a huge amount of information if we join the person in what they're doing. So for example, Maravik described that person who is taking the pictures off the walls and taking them apart and packing them up. If her spouse was to help her do that, he might get a huge amount of information about why she's doing it and why it's important to her. And not only that, he becomes her ally and not the person who's trying to stop her from doing it. And it's really important to become somebody's ally. Okay, so joining the person, even if you think their behavior is a bit crazy, can be really helpful. Okay, we want to simply take a pause, look around, listen, pay attention, right? Pay attention to what the person's doing, what they're saying, all of that great information, right? We want to actually, in your brain, record it, I'm not saying whip out your cell phone and actually videotape it, but I'm saying really observe what's going on, observe what the person's doing, but also observe the environment, take note of what was happening just before, what was happening during, all of that stuff. Okay. Think about sensation and remember that what the person living with dementia feels might not be the same as what they feel, right? Is there a scratchy tag in their sweater? Are they cold? Have they been sitting in the same position for too long and haven't had the gross motor skills to just make those small adjustments to make sure they're more comfortable? All of that sensation stuff can be a really big factor here. We review the amount of activity the person's been doing. So have they been really active all day? Have they been really inactive all day and all kinds of energy has been building up and is pent up and needs to be released? So, we look for a happy medium. What's going on meeting their activities needs right now? Are they bored all day? And this is the first time all day that you had a moment to pay attention to them, right? Or have they been getting attention all day long? And now you're trying to give them more and it's too much and they need their space. So we want to look at it in context of activity levels. Okay. We want to reflect on the person's routine. Okay. So is there nothing? One big one is when there's nothing going on in the environment that tells the person what to expect. So very often, the beginning of the day is really busy, and there's lots of things organized and there's a routine, in the morning, most people have a pretty strict routine, and then you get to dinner and there's nothing after that. And so is there not enough information for this person to know what they should be doing now? Because not knowing what you should be doing can be really anxiety provoking. And you get a lot of questions of what should I do now, or what time is it, or right? People will tend to do one of two things when they have no idea what they should be doing. They'll either go to sleep or they'll get agitated. So we want to make sure that the person has some cues of what they should be doing right now. Okay. And also what's coming up next. Okay. So that's my list.
All right, so we wanted to talk a little bit about a roadmap. So this is kind of a guideline for care partners to look at. It's a little bit of a repetition of what we've already spoken about, but we think that it's important just to kind of go over. So I think we'll go over this relatively quick. Of things to consider. It's kind of your cheat sheet. And of course, you can always add to this cheat sheet. So Maravik, do you just want to go over the physical?
So
Very quickly.
Very quickly, physical, we're always looking at intake, so meaning hunger and thirst. So are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Do they have enough? Or even like the amount of food that you're taking, right? That they're taking at that time of the day. Yeah, are you giving them coffee late afternoon, or something that could really, instead of like looking at because your goal is at night, you want to calm them down, then you may want to look at that. Even medication. So that could be also part of the physical intake. Energy, again, it's like the sleep wake, low energy, high energy. So as I have like explained before, their activities during the day, do they need nap in between, in the middle, so that they could keep that rhythm smooth and everything? So that kind of thing. Elimination, when you need to go, you need to go. And sometimes person with dementia have difficulty or doesn't have the ability to initiate. So even going to the bathroom or to eliminate is a challenge. So especially at the end of the day, when their energy level and everything is just not working, so it could be a trigger. Discomfort, again, as Karen would say, like, I mean, as little as like, sensitivity to things, to light, to pain, your comfort level. So it's really important, and even to the point of like personal preferences, right? I think this is where the person is really different from other clients, because all of us have personal preferences, and knowing that, and those different times as caregivers would actually aid us or help us in supporting our loved ones.
Can I give an example of that?
Sure.
Please.
Megan, can I give your example?
Sure.
All right. So one day I have a job to do. When Megan's elderly, I have the job of letting her caregivers know Megan's preference when she goes to bed. When Megan goes to bed, she needs to be wearing her socks. If she's not wearing her socks, she's going to be agitated, and she may not be able to put her own socks on. But here's the thing. This sounds very straightforward, right? But Megan's a little nutty about her socks, because she has to wear her socks when she first goes to bed. But at some point soon after, her socks need to be removed, and one of her feet has to be sticking out from under her comforter. And if this series of events doesn't happen, Megan's not going to go to sleep. So discomfort for one person might be really unique, shall we say. But if things feel wrong, if people don't know to take off Megan's socks and help her get one foot out from under her comforter, she might get really agitated and not go to sleep and be chronically overtired and start to sundown, and it becomes a huge issue, all because nobody knew to take off Megan's sock.
And let me just tell whoever's coming to another lecture, like a panel discussion, I will be sure to have an example of all of Karen's habits.
I have no weird ones at all. I'm totally normal.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So, and
my favorite example.
Last but not least is actually pain. So, I mean, as all of you, we are all like adverse to pain, right? We don't want to be in pain. The problem with people with dementia at times is that they can't even recognize that they're in pain. They can't tell you verbally. So it really takes a lot of us, some detective work, especially at the later stages of the disease, to actually find this. If they have like infections, or if they're swelling on the toe. I know it happens in one of our clients that why all of a sudden he was agitated and everything, and then later we noticed that actually one of his big toe is actually infected, so he was in pain all along. So So
And
yeah.
it's surprising. Sometimes it happens very rarely. Remember, we used to have a lady years ago in the day center who was quite early in the progression of the disease and who seemed very verbally articulate. And she got really irritable and grumpy all of a sudden. We couldn't figure out what was going on. And it took weeks to figure out that she had a hairline fracture in her shin. But if you asked her if she was okay, she said she was fine, that she had no pain.
Yeah.
So it took real detective work, even for a person. And I think at the time, I remember we were all really surprised that this was a person. We would have expected her to be able to recognize and articulate that she was having pain. So sometimes it surprises us. We think, well, I asked him and he said it was fine. Or I asked her even specifically, does your knee hurt or does your leg hurt? And she said no. So we think, okay, it's probably fine, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not. We don't realize that people don't recognize their own pain.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to go through this very quickly because I see the time and I want to hear from actually the care partners who are watching this today. So just the environment, again, we talked about too much or too little stimulation. So this could include loud noises, no noise, where they think that nothing's happening and they're searching for something to do. Clutter, I know that can be really challenging, not being able to find things that they might be looking for and start moving and packing things. The season, of course, we're at the height of it now. Hopefully, COVID times doesn't make it any easier. We haven't even talked about that. And wayfinding. So for those of you who are a little bit confused of what this term is, it's really the term that is used to try to find your way in your environment. So finding the bathroom, going to the kitchen, knowing where your bedroom is. So it could be where someone wakes up in the middle of the night and they can't find where they want to go. So that's for the environment very quickly. Karen, quickly, the emotional.
So in terms of emotional triggers, 3 big ones are problems with regulation. So people with dementia can have a really hard time self-soothing, so calming down emotions once they've been triggered, and that can get worse at sundowning. Apathy, which is difficulty self-motivating, and needing validation of however they're feeling. So anger, sadness, loneliness, boredom, feeling incompetent, and having that feeling build up over the course of the day when you have problems over and over and over again, right? But also, sometimes people need to have their positive emotions validated, and sometimes we forget to do that. So the person is happy or excited or satisfied, and we don't take the time or have the time to recognize and validate that, can also be a source of frustration for people.
Okay. So now is a little bit of an interactive time. So rather than having people unmute themselves, which can get a little bit complicated and noisy, if you could just type in, does everyone, hopefully everyone sees where their chat box is. If you'd like, we want to hear from you guys because, you know, we have, gosh knows, years and years of experience working with families who have dementia, but our expertise, we're not caring for someone who has it in our personal lives. And I think that our experience is really coming from the knowledge and the expertise of you as care partners. So if you can just write in the chat, if you feel comfortable, what works for you? What tips do you have as care partners when you're dealing with sundowning behavior? And we'll read them out. We should have music playing in the background, guys.
I hope that you guys are not all like, oh no, that's why I'm at the lecture.
I know some, as an example, sometimes people, spouses will call one of their children, and whoever it is on the other line, they just have a knack with their parent, and they can bring out bring out that kind of that validation and that reassurance to the person with dementia who might be agitated at the time. So
Sometimes
I know,
too, sorry, Megan, I was going to say, sometimes I think that that works also because you're bringing in a new person who hasn't been doing this all day long already, right? It's like bringing in like fresh troops to like deal with this tough time of day.
yeah, and other times what we hear is someone who might be wanting to go home or feeling like they're not in their environment. Some caregivers often tell us that all they need to do is go outside very quickly. Some people get in the car, go for a quick drive, and then they come back just to kind of change that, break that cycle. Now we know that that can be very challenging at 2 in the morning, that's when we have to kind of keep thinking about other strategies and solutions for that family.
Yeah. So we have a message here saying nothing works for hours. Okay. There's obviously that's really tough that it's going on for hours every night, but it does also make me want to point out that it does pass. I know it's tough, and we need to sometimes we have to deal with the fact that this person is going to be confused and agitated at this time of day, no matter what we do. Plan for those times and realize that, I might have to have extra help for 3 hours, but then it will pass. Nobody's confused forever, every minute of the day.
Mm-hmm.
We have another message here. My father's having a difficult time coping with my mother, who is sundowning but doesn't want to get help or advice. Any suggestions?
Well, I think that very often as spouses or parents are hearing so much advice from the doctors, medical professionals, very often people are very quick to give advice to care partners when sometimes they don't need advice at that moment. Sometimes they just need validation and empathy and saying, you know what, this must be really hard for you, because it's just like, can you believe that this is happening on an ongoing basis? You seem like you're not getting a break. Say, when you need a break, please, like, I'm here to help. Would it be helpful if I just take mom away and we can go for a walk? Or do you think I could call mom at this time of day and maybe listen to music together? I know I'm thinking COVID times, but again, giving advice, we just have to make sure that it's welcomed advice and that, we're going at the pace of the care partner, because I think that it's very complex to be a care partner, and we're very quick to judge and find that solution when emotionally they're not even ready for that. Does Maravik, do you want to add or have
I agree. And all of this, people have been married for most of that, 50, 60 years, and you can't just introduce a stranger into the dynamic right away. So I think, for children, I think it's really good advice to actually validate what your dad is, have been doing, and that really offer that if you need time, a break, I could be here. That's a good start for that. And then, the more he sees that, it's actually helping him, then maybe he might be open to other suggestions or to other advices. But I think right now at this time, it's really just to validate him of the hard work that he's doing.
I think too, you trying some of the things that you've learned and him witnessing the fact that sometimes it works. Okay, I'm not going to say every time it works, but sometimes it works. That itself can be motivating, right? We have a nice message from Sylvia that says what works for her and her husband is just trying a different situation. Then I get a snack or a coffee to break it. I think that's a great tip. Going into a different room, leaving the house, going for a walk, going for a drive, food, doing something different, breaking out of the pattern that you're in. Just being somewhere else can shift can shift things. And sometimes all we want is the person to calm down and be docile so we can go to bed because we're tired, right? And it seems like a lot of work to say, okay, let's get up. I know it's 11 o'clock at night, but let's get up and go for a walk. And we'll keep talking about this when we get back, because breaking out of that cycle, doing something different can sometimes be enough to kind of reset things. So that's a great strategy, Sylvia.
Okay, so here's another one, Karen and Maravik. I start to sing a song and my mom will join in and forget she was agitated.
We use this one in the day center all the time. That's for me, and probably for Maravik and Megan, singing is my number one go-to group management strategy. Whenever I think that people are either bored or people are starting to get agitated or anxious, I break out into song. And I'm not getting any recording contracts anytime soon, but it's almost irresistible for people if you break out into a song that's really well known. It's very difficult for somebody with a really well working rhythm section of their brain to resist it.
And if you can't sing well, like myself, what we do is kind of make fun of it, right? So it actually gets them, they might actually say, wow, you're terrible. And I said, well, I like to have fun. And it kind of just changes the mood. So that kind of works too.
I always tell people, if you don't sing well, sing loud, because people admire your confidence.
Absolutely. So
Maravik sings like an angel, so she doesn't have that problem.
Yeah. I'm going to just go to this slide, and then I'm going to go back to the next one, because I think this is
I just
really
want to say one more thing about singing, if that's okay, Megan, before we move on from it. Singing forces you and the person living with dementia to take a deep breath. If you tell a person living with dementia who's agitated, take a deep breath, it'll help you calm down, they probably won't be able to do it, because in that state, it's like, it's asking too much sort of organization to consciously take that deep breath. But when you start to sing a song, the person has to take a deep breath, and that can actually calm down the cortisol levels in the brain, which is the stress hormone, and everybody's going to end up feeling better. So singing has real clinical reasons, physical reasons why it works.
Absolutely. Okay. So I know it's 1 o'clock. We have 2 more slides just to get through. So care partner sundowning. When we started doing, preparing for this panel discussion, we started really talking about, care partners and being tired at the end of the day. Are we more rigid at the end of the day? Whether or not you're a care partner or not, you might have small kids at home. You might have had a stressful job. Sometimes we're really more rigid at the end of the day. We're exhausted. We don't want someone, asking us a million questions that you've just answered the question to. You don't want someone in your space, in your kitchen, when you're just trying to get the meal on the table, but they've always helped to, or they were always the one that was cooking and making meals for the family. So do you experience yourself as a care partner compassion fatigue after a long day? Because we're talking about sundowning for the person living with dementia, but we all believe that as care partners, we can kind of sundown as well. And we have to look at our own body language. We have to look at how we are perceiving the noise, the environment, our own physical and emotional well-being. And is that person living with dementia, are they just kind of feeding off on our exhausted energy? And I think that if care partners can kind of take that deep breath and calm themselves down, know what you need to do to kind of pace your own day. So one of my suggestions, and Karen and Mary, you can chime in, is if you know that you need a break during the day, yes, there's COVID times, but whatever that might be, you need to read a book or watch TV or do a crossword, whatever that might be.
Or take a nap.
Take a nap.
Often the person living with dementia is napping, and it's okay if you need to nap too. It's okay. Especially
Absolutely.
if you're often up late into the night because the person is sundowning.
Yeah. So try to figure out the right rhythm of the day for you as a care partner as well. Okay, it's very important, and it's a good time for you to reflect on your own well-being too. Okay, so Maravik, do you want to go on our last slide?
Okay, tips.
This is a summary.
This is a summary, yeah. So I mean, these are things that you can actually. I like this part because I mean something that you could really try on. So again, maintain a predictable routine for both you and your how do you say this, and your loved one, your family member. So that thinking in mind as well, that like that rest wake sleep wake rhythm, low energy, high energy, how long is the nap, because your goal at the end of the day is that if they could like keep that, like they could have a longer rest at night. So that's maintain that in mind. Plan for activities and exposure to light during the day. I know that it's hard right now with our weather, but I know some people, actually some of my clients have invested on, they say UV light. I don't know how much it is and if it's really working, but it's like in our environment here and our weather, maybe it's something that if it's not too pricey, maybe something you could like try on. Again, limit daytime napping. Again, it really depends on your their body routine, right? Their rhythm, your loved one's rhythm. So if they kind of like engage in an activity for 30 minutes, and then after that, if they need a break for 10-15 minutes, then that should be the rhythm for this person. Caffeine and sugar, we know how it impacts us. At least for me, I know that I can't have it after lunch. Keep a night light on, but for some, maybe a night light off. If they start with, like, I mean, if they're a person who really falls asleep in total darkness, then maybe that's what you need to do, and just like have a light on the, when they get up to go to the bathroom. Reduce background noise and stimulating activities. So it could be music. If you're looking, there's the music there, then find the right kind or genre of music, because your goal is to calm down the person. And if you be having rhythm, you're the rhythm brain of person with dementia is it's more responsive. So it depends on what kind of stimulation you're actually introducing to him. Bring familiar items to unfamiliar settings, whatever it is. It may be he loved this pillow or the bed sheet or the picture frame of the family. So something that can really calm the person down. And if all else fail, talk to your doctor. Okay, talk to your doctor, because I think maybe he needs medication. Maybe they need to readjust the medication in order to actually manage the behaviors. And also consider environmental cues. Again, as we spoke, is it too stimulating, wherever they are? I mean, I know it takes a lot of planning and everything, but I mean, and again, another tip, it doesn't have to be you, right? It doesn't have to be only you. So start thinking about who is the right person to actually bring in when the person is sundowning. Because it doesn't have to be only you. So that's another tip, I guess, that we need to put in there. So yeah.
So thank you, guys. I see that we're only 5 minutes over the time, so that's pretty good. Didn't get through all the slides, but maybe we need a sundowning part 2 in the new year, talking about actual possible case studies and practical. So thank you, Maravik. Thank you, Karen, for sharing your expertise and experience on sundowning. I think that what we see is that there's lots of possible reasons or causes for the behavior, possible things you can try. And when in doubt, you need to just be that investigator. Please feel free to call AGI and speak with a counselor if you're having trouble with this. We will work with you, probably ask you many more questions about the situation. But we're doing so not to be intrusive, but really trying to get to the bottom of it, because there's always more than one reason why something's happening. Pay attention to yourselves. Think about the topic about caregivers sundowning or care providers sundowning, and please, if you please fill out the survey as well, because we really want to know if you like this format with expertise from AGI counselors. So we will do it again if you do like it. And it's kind of fun to have a discussion about something like this. So have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you at the next lecture about gratitude in 2020 on December 17th. So have a great day, everyone.
Start thinking about what you're grateful for now.
Yes, please join us. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.